everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of Teddy Talks. I'm here with Andy.
Hello, everyone.
Hope everyone is well. Today we're going to delve into a few different things. I'll let you just go straight into it, shall I?
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for hitting the like button and subscribe. After the last podcast, obviously we went quite deep, and I said some quite profound things about myself and my experiences, and about how we strive to improve. And as befitting to what happens in the world, in our lives, when we're striving and we're also putting information out, we then get tested ourselves. So it's almost like, well, if you're going to put this information out for the people, then
I'm going to test and make sure you're on top of your
game. Where are you at?
Yeah.
And I got tested.
Okay. Let's delve into it.
So, without going into the details of what happened, because that's a story, and we're not looking at the story, we're looking at the reactions. Now, as I have professed from the very first video, I'm no guru. I'm not sitting at the top of a mountain smoking flowers thinking I've sussed everything out. Far from it. But every experience I do have, I will look at and see, okay, what have I learned from that, etc., etc. So last week, it's no accident that although I'm more on top of my game than I used to be, there are certain aspects where I have Achilles heels, as we all do.
Yeah.
So I'm putting out this information, sharing this knowledge. It's like, okay, here you go. On the Achilles heel, do you know what I mean? Now, my reaction was, okay, I didn't overreact, didn't get angry, because that has very much been an issue within my life, is anger. As to why is another story altogether, but we can all have reasons and excuses as to why we are like we are.
Yeah, of course.
It's regardless of what that reason, what the story is, what the excuse is. It's about, okay, well, do I want to change?
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to improve and change for an improvement, whatever I've done. It's just how I am as a person. I'm sure most people could say the same. No one wants to stay in a dark place or a negative state.
Of course, yeah.
So it's just about how you go about making those changes. That's why I invite people to come here to learn from my experiences. The last thing I want to do is make this podcast about me, but by me sharing my experiences, I'm hoping will help people sort of
relate to them,
relate their own experiences. So literally what took place was no initial reaction from me, but what I find I do with myself is I go inward and I internalize. More than anything, what I do is I'll withdraw my energy from the situation. So say it's with someone, where the relationship you have is with someone in a shop, with a parent, with a sibling, with a next door neighbor. That's still a relationship. So within that relationship, that's where you'll find there's the issues happen. Is there's a division in your opinions on how you see things. And so when there's that divide and it's coming from two almost equal opposites, it's just like, what I'll do within that relationship is I will remove my energy from that relationship. So I would say I stayed at 0 point, but it wasn't like I was, everything's fine. So you don't go into denial. You acknowledge that there's this thing there. So within that itself, having a reaction, the most important thing with relationships and how we go through life is you have a certain level of patience, certain level of understanding, certain level of forgiveness. You start at that as your base point.
I think it's good to have, like you said as well, the awareness So you're aware that you could have been drawn into, but because of the awareness, you managed to control yourself, keep
Yeah,
yourself at 0 point, and not get dragged into whatever the situation being with the, in that relationship.
yeah,
And I think that's a good point. Is once you become aware of how you're reacting, or how when these things are popping up and testing us,
yeah,
um, once you become aware of how you react, what could pull you in, what's the catalyst, as mentioned on last week's, then you take back control, because okay, this is happening again. I'll take a step back from this, and you know, monitor yourself, monitor your own thoughts, and from there you can improve, can't you?
yeah. So when you're withdrawing yourself, you're energetically withdrawing yourself from the relationship that's taken place with that person in that moment. Um, the thin divide line, the subtlety of it all is what's really most important, is looking at those subtleties.
Yeah.
So if I withdraw my energy from that, because it's been a situation where you feel like you're being patient, you're being forgiving, and you're showing tolerance. If you don't feel as though that's been reciprocated, initially what you're going to do is you're going to snap, you're going to react, you're going to get angry and all the rest of it. And then, of course, you're then into a full-blown argument, which isn't healthy for yourself, isn't healthy for the other person, isn't healthy for everything around you. So when you're withdrawing that energy, to react in an angry way, for example, isn't beneficial. So not reacting, but staying at 0 point is important. But then if you're staying at 0 point, but you're holding resentment, then
you're not at true 0 point there.
No, you're not. So it's a thin divide line.
Yeah.
So at the same time, do you carry on acting, oh, nothing's wrong, and pretending? They see the subtlety, see the difference. Oh, nothing's wrong, everything's fine. Unconditional love, blah, blah, blah. So that's another thing altogether. Unconditional love is something that really needs to be looked at as well, because, okay, so you're not reacting, but you're holding resentment. That's carrying a certain frequency.
Yep.
Okay. You then, from that, or if you've overreacted, you then afterwards may be feeling guilt. It's another lower frequency so all of these emotions are creating frequencies within you and frequencies around you. Then you've got the other side of the coin, the polarity, is the unconditional love. Okay. Which certain aspects and certain situations, it's a good trait to have, but
with boundaries too.
Yeah, the thing is with unconditional love is where does it
where do you
stop?
Draw the line on some things? Yeah.
So if you just have this unconditional love for situations, whether it be what's going on in the outside world within the collective, or whether it's with an individual, however close to you or not, then what you're doing is you haven't got any boundaries. So when you don't have any boundaries and you have this unconditional love, again, this is very much learned through personal experience, which was very painful to deal with at the time, but probably one of my most important life lessons ever. I went through that stage probably 10, 15 years ago of having that unconditional love, or trying to have that unconditional love.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really true. It was almost like an act.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to improve myself and trying to, it wasn't virtue signaling from the perspective of, I must look the part and all the rest of it. It was what I genuinely felt was what was required.
Yeah.
But all that happens when you don't have those boundaries is you're then in a situation where people can take advantage.
Walk all over you sometimes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And when that happens and you keep on trying to unconditional, what really you're doing in that situation is you're not having any unconditional love for yourself, because you haven't got those boundaries. So you're looking at a situation where, from my perspective, and it ticked all the boxes for me, was that you're looking at someone's, say, so it's a relationship situation, you're looking at someone's potentiality. Okay, no, there is good in them. They can be good.
Yeah.
They will be there. And so then you compensate that thought process for then being in a situation where you're like, if I just show that unconditional love, they will see the true me. They'll see the real me, and they'll change.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately,
doesn't always work.
Some people don't change.
No, I think that's also. Go on, sorry.
When you're in a situation where you're dealing with narcissistic personalities or the next level up psychopaths, they will use every inch of that unconditional love to their own advantage.
Take advantage, yeah.
So you will never, you have that situation where you're like, well, I will sacrifice my happiness for their potentiality. Their potentiality will come through. They'll see it, and they'll start behaving. Well, they're never going to behave correctly because they have this psychopathic or narcissistic personality. I mean, we have to remember that, again, the programs, and this is always going to be a key feature in these talks, is we're all so easily programmed as human beings. And only when we look deeper into the concept of what is going on within ourselves, within the collective, can we break it down. But how often do we stop
to take a step back and analyze?
And analyze it? We don't. So with the psychopaths, for example, and the narcissistic personalities, until you break down what is going on within a relationship, for example, only then can you see, okay, right, now I can see why I continuously kept getting burnt, because I kept thinking that there would be a potentiality that they would see,
and they didn't.
No, they won't.
Yeah,
because it's just about them stealing energy, for want of a better word, and getting what they can out of any given situation.
Yeah, I think all of us have probably dealt with somebody along those lines at some point in our lives.
Absolutely. So the withdrawing of your energy
shuts that down
in those situations is important.
Yeah.
Now you can be in certain relationships with people where you don't have to see them all the time, and you have to withdraw your energy from that situation. That's the boundaries. Okay, but the unconditional side of that is okay, but no reaction for yourself.
Yeah.
Until you have unconditional love for yourself, you ain't going to have unconditional love for anyone anyway.
Yeah.
Until you have love for yourself, you ain't going to have love for other people, not genuine love. The most important thing about love is you've got to love yourself first.
Yeah.
Now, that can be a lot more challenging than people ever realise. Yeah, I love myself, but what?
Yeah, and it doesn't mean in like a vain, superficial way either. You're talking about just loving the essence of the core of the person you are and your morals and, like who you stand for and what you believe in.
Absolutely.
You've got to be aligned with that. And I think that's where, everyone's going to have their imperfections, so to speak. Everyone's going to have things that they're insecure about.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to have the things that they're, they wish they could maybe correct, or they're on the path to correcting within themselves. But at the same time, when you're aligned with your morals and you're on the right path to maybe correcting those things or accepting those things and say, okay, I'm not perfect. I know I can sometimes do this, but I'm aware of it now. I'm taking accountability for it.
Yeah.
That's when you can then, go down that line of loving yourself.
Yeah.
And to touch back onto like the other people as well, I think you're also doing a disservice to those if you let them walk all over you. When you withdraw your energy to become aware of how they're treating you, and then you set your boundaries, if you're not doing that, then they're never going to learn. And the whole reason why you're probably showing them unconditional love is because you care for them, you love them, and you don't want to hurt them, but you're hurting them more by not setting your boundaries and almost teaching them the lesson they need to learn at this point or within that relationship. I feel like it's almost a disservice to the person as well.
Yeah, and that's where relationships are so important in everything we do on a day-to-day basis. Again, whether that's with a local shopkeeper, whether it's with a neighbour, whether it's with
Yeah,
a
it can be
partner,
anybody. Yeah.
whether it's with a child. That is really our key point to progressing forward within ourselves, doing the inner work.
Yeah.
So, without having that knowledge and that forethought of, okay, what are my lessons going to be today in my relationships I have with people, whether it's at work, whether it's going outside into the open world or at home, what's my relationship with myself, looking at that. So it's important that we don't ever make an assumption about people in those relationships. One of the biggest things that we do generally is we make assumptions about people. And one of my favourite sayings from that counselling course was the importance of not to assume. Because if you assume something about someone, what does assume spell? Assume spells you make an ass out of you and me.
Yeah.
So assumptions very much do fit that. Everyone has their own experiences. Everyone has had their own experiences, which puts them in a place where they are at that particular moment in their life.
Yeah.
They've also got levels of consciousness, which mean they won't think as deep or as internally as yourself.
Yeah.
So therefore, you can't expect them to be thinking in that manner as well.
Yeah, of course.
There is also, that's where the patience comes in. And also, if they don't have that same level of conscious awareness, you have to have the forgiveness for that. So you're not making judgments. You have that patience and forgiveness, and that helps after the initial situation event that's taken place. You can come from a better place. So what you're doing in that situation is you're then being kinder to yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're not stuck in this negative vibration, this tenseness, etc. One good exercise for people that they can use is if they do find themselves have had an episode with someone or society just reacting to what's on the news, etc. What most people do is they bury that thought, that feeling, those emotions, because it's uncomfortable. Who would choose to be in an uncomfortable situation?
Yeah.
Well, that's all well and good.
But that's where we learn and grow.
That's where the growth is.
Yeah.
In that discomfort. So what people can do in those situations, and it doesn't matter if you don't do it every time, but if you just go with the intention of, okay, I want to start making improvements in myself, how I feel, as I'm not in a great place at the moment, is when you feel those moments of tension within yourself, is just stop for a moment, find yourself a quiet place. Only has to take a minute. Everyone can find a minute. You can pop off to the toilet, to the bathroom, just have a minute to yourself, close your eyes, and just feel where that tension is in your body. Acknowledge that it's there and feel where it, so it might be in your stomach, it might be in your heart, it might be in your throat. All of them have connotations within themselves as to what they ultimately mean within you for yourself. Which, if you were in classic counselling, that would be like, okay, you'll monitor that, look at that and monitor it and say, okay, so what other emotions does that bring up, etc., etc. But by stopping for a minute and acknowledging where that tension is in your body, because your body won't lie to you. Your thoughts will lie to you.
Yeah.
I can assure you, your thoughts will lie to you. Because that's the fail-safe that we have to try and keep on top of things. Okay. In the world that we live in today, the fact that we haven't got a whole society going completely mentally bonkers
goes to show.
It goes to show how strong we all are. But we don't actually even acknowledge that as a society, as a culture. It's, oh, the mental health situation, blah, blah, blah. It is off the charts, and their ways of treating it by the mainstream are completely ludicrous and are absolutely mental in themselves. But by just acknowledging in that moment, going back to how we deal with it, acknowledge that that tension is there in ourselves. Feel where it is in the body. Again, the body doesn't lie.
Mm-hmm.
Acknowledge that. See what thoughts and emotions that brings up. Accept. So you acknowledge it first, and then you accept that it's there. That acceptance, straight away, is shining like a light of consciousness on it.
Almost halves the problem straight away, doesn't it?
Straight away.
Yeah.
So by doing that, you're doing yourself such an invaluable service.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's starting on the road to beginning to love yourself, because you're going to do the work on yourself.
Yeah. The inner work, as you always call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like you said, you're almost halving that issue. What people do by burying it is they're putting it in their subconscious.
And it will compound over time.
Yeah, and
it will come up in other areas.
As I've said from the get-go, 95% of our emotions, our decisions, our reactions, and how we behave come from the subconscious.
Yeah.
That's mainstream science acknowledges that.
Yeah.
So,
must be wrong then. No.
So what you've got is a situation where you keep burying stuff. All it's going to do is compound it. It's going to get bigger and bigger and snowball until an event will happen where you snap.
Yeah.
And that can happen on a daily basis. So with me with the anger situation, that was, I can look back in my childhood, and there'd be situations where that anger would come out, and I reckon I was probably primary school age,
mm-hmm.
where I realised that anger that built up in me would then be released. Mm-hmm. I'd let it go, and I felt better for it.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, it's almost like I have to have these anger moments to feel okay again, because they build up. And this was a great lesson I learned in holographic kinetics, was that the understanding of how the universe works, how we work within the universe, everything is on a cycle, everything is looped. So people who have certain reactions and character traits that they want to change, they will see that it's on a loop.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a pendulum swinging.
You'll keep being taught the lesson until you learn from the lesson.
Yeah. Action, reaction, action, reaction. Now, when you're in that midpoint where there is neither, everything seems calm, everything feels, okay, I'm in control, and then all of a sudden something will happen. The action will take place, the reaction then happens.
Yeah.
And, if people can look at themselves, the reaction doesn't have to be anger. It could be guilt. It could be any other strong emotion, resentment, blah, mm-hmm. blah, blah, where you'll see there's this loop that goes on.
Even things within yourself, like personal things as well.
Absolutely.
Because as you're talking now, I'm getting little clicks in my head like, that relate to my own personal life right now.
So share one of them, for example.
Okay, how do I? So there can be a situation that arises, say, every year. Could be the same time every year for me. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if I don't learn the lesson, I go through the same cycle again for that next 12 months,
right,
until I come up to that point again. Okay, it might not be 12 months, it might be 6 months or whatever, but it's like I go through the pendulum swing. So everything's okay. Oh, a little thing, we'll bury that, don't worry about it. And then all of a sudden the little thing becomes, as the reaction, as you say.
Yeah.
And then if I don't address that, and I've noticed this over the course of my life, I feel like I go through cycles. And if I don't learn from the lesson I'm being taught,
yeah,
then the cycle will repeat. And then if I do learn, it almost exposes more different things, but another step up, should we say, if you're going to put it in like terms of a game. So it's like I'm going up these steps, and each step is like a cycle.
Yeah.
And I can, as you're talking about it now, I can think, this is what's going on now. This is what's going on. This is what was happening 6 months ago or something.
Yeah.
And it's just it's like you say, I kind of like relate to things when you gamify them, because it's almost like you go up a level. Every time you take a step back, you're aware, you give awareness to what's going on. You learn your lesson, so to speak. You don't react, okay, what's this telling me? What's this teaching me? You then go up a level. And then there'll be different challenges or different situations, different cycles will repeat on that level until you learn your lesson again. And then you go up another level,
Yeah.
And I've read somewhere years ago about if you gamify your life, it helps you to break things down and understand it. So as you're talking, it's kind of doing that for me.
Yeah.
I know I haven't given a specific thing, but it's just like little things will go in my head, and then over the next 24, 48 hours, what you've said now will sort of settle, and I'll
well,
maybe next one I'll be able to come back and explain. But
you started off by saying a cycle in a year. So let's just say, for example, it's someone's birthday.
Yeah.
And as they're getting older, so when I hit 29 and 3/4, I had a massive shift.
Yeah.
I'd never, up until that point, I'd never been interested in buying a house and having this settled down. I did a lot of traveling between the age of 20 and 30. I had no intention of it. It's just like, why would I want to do that? Do you know what I mean? Limit myself. I hit 29 and 3/4, and it was like being hit like a bolt from the blue. And I was like, I've got to get somewhere to live. I need to basically find somewhere to live and have a base. It was palpable how powerful it was. I say 29 and 3/4, people thinking, yeah, that's a little bit, exact.
But you're coming up to your 30th, which is like a big milestone.
Yeah,
your
well,
decade.
30 was a big year for me. It's like, shit, I'm not a youngster anymore. Living a youngster's life of wanting to go out and party all the time, etc. I was like, 30, wow. And that changed my attitude when it came to my sport, playing football. Stopped going out on a Friday night rather than turning up with a hangover every Saturday morning, and feeling out of sorts and then running it off. Like I said, I then thought, right, I want to find somewhere to live permanently, buy a house, etc. But that 29 and 3/4 cycle, which I didn't realise until years later, maybe 15 years later, 10, 15 years later, that this happens in people.
Yeah.
Because you've got a 29 and 3/4 cycle on Saturn.
Right.
And Saturn, this is where the planet Saturn, you're kind of like, well, what's that got to do? Who knows? This is why we're still relatively unaware of what we are and where we are in this solar system, this universe, and how things affect us. But it's a thing. And when Saturn hits this 29 and 3/4 cycle, it can have profound effects on us. Well, like I said, I found that out retrospectively. I found that out a long time after, and was like, now it makes sense as to why I had this massive shift in what I should be doing in my life.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that, because 30 seems to be a big milestone where people are right, okay, I've got to get serious now.
Yeah.
Whether it's societal pressure of that age being a specific thing, or like you say, there's deeper meaning behind it. But I often feel like big birthdays with a 0 on the end, they that's a cycle within people. And then like New Year's. New Year's seems to be a yearly cycle where everyone's like, right, okay, I'm going to get serious now. For health and fitness or whatever that be. There's micro cycles and then larger cycles, definitely.
Yeah, well, that whole thing with New Year, people making New Year's resolutions, I think it's important to stress the importance of not doing that. Again, that's another program that's been put into us. So, you should make a New Year's resolution. 100%. When you know that it's been put out to the collective, what's your New Year's resolution? And you have it repeated on the radio, on the television. What's your New Year's resolution going to be? The problem the problem with doing a New Year's resolution, because I'll hear my children talk about it, for example, and it's like when there's programming going on when so what's your New Year's resolution? Okay, interesting. But what you're doing when you agree or start thinking about you're setting yourself up to failure.
Yeah.
Because you're doing it because it's kind of like that's what we all do.
Yeah.
Whereas rather than once a year, we need to make this change in ourselves. Because people are thinking, I just want to improve myself.
Yeah.
I want to be better at this.
That can start any day, though, can't it?
Yeah, and that's the importance of it.
Yeah.
It can start any day. Why does it have to be one day of the year?
Yeah, that's
so important, because if you're waiting for one day of the year, then all it means is in that other 364 days, and that's why
can
the
go to waste.
vast majority of people's New Year's resolutions fail.
Mhm.
Because you can see that when you go to the gym, it'll be packed in January and February or more full, and then by the time January's finished or
Slowly starts to filter out.
it filters out, and then you're just back
Mhm.
to those people who are going on a daily basis. So your changes can be made in this moment,
Yeah.
not tomorrow or the end
Yeah.
of the year.
I heard it might have been Tony Robbins years ago called it manana syndrome. So
Yeah,
you putting off till tomorrow, but it it doesn't necessarily mean like you're putting off, but like if you're not willing to do what you want to do on that day today, then there's the likelihood you're going to unsucceed at doing it at a different day.
yeah,
You know, because
yeah,
these things, like you say, you can make the decision consciously now to be like, right, no, I'm going to do this now. I'm not going to wait till this day. I'm not going to wait until New Year's to then do it, because if you're not going to do it today, at the end of the day, you're not going to do it
no,
on New Year's Day,
no,
New Year's Eve, New Year's,
yeah.
whenever you.
So that's why the importance of nothing stopping you from doing it in this moment.
Mhm.
You know, you can make the change at any time, and that starts with your change of thought. Okay, I want to start improving myself physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, whatever word you want to put,
Yeah.
title you want to put on it. But really, if it's physically, for example, that has to go hand in hand with the inner work as well.
Yeah, of
Because
course.
the two do go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And what you'll find is by doing the inner work, the physical work will benefit from that.
Yeah. Everything starts in it, though, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, everything starts in it. I've learned that over the years. I think um, the gym has taught me that the more the inner work that you do, the better, the easier everything becomes, so to speak. So like gym has become like a thing that I do every day, like brushing my teeth, and I don't think about it. You know, people are like, oh, how do you go to the gym every day after you've had a busy day, late, doing a physical work on site, blah 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 blah. And it's just one of them things. But years ago, when I was leaving high school, like I was going to the gym after work or after school, and it was one of them things where the more I improved, the more I improved. Like, okay, I'm going to do this because it's good for me. It shows respect for my body. It shows respect for myself. It helps with my confidence. You do those inner things, the more that those tasks that you think are hard become a lot easier.
Yeah. So getting in good habits.
Yeah, good habits.
Yeah.
And that's inner work, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's, and realizing why you're doing it as well. Not
Yeah.
just doing it because, oh, I think this is good for me. No, I'm doing it because if I improve myself here, this is going to have a compounding effect on every other
Yeah.
aspect of my life as well.
This is where the subtleties of situations can sometimes get in the way. I spoke about subtleties earlier.
Mm-hmm.
People are focusing just on the gym and just about their outward appearance. Yeah, it'll make them feel better.
Yeah.
But really, it's about looking good externally.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if that's just the focus, just physical, I
Yeah.
want to get myself into this great shape, and then I'll feel better in myself.
Mm-hmm.
But really, what you're doing is, and it's a subtle dichotomy here, is you want to look good for other people.
Yeah. It's not.
Okay, so
You're doing it for the wrong reasons.
yeah. So unless you're looking at what's going on overall in you and your reactions and how you feel about yourself and how you react in situations and relationships, only then by doing that internal work,
Mm-hmm.
introspection, are you then able to, okay, what is this about?
Yeah.
So, if the focus is just on the physical and how you look, then in actual fact, you're actually doing yourself a disservice and you're actually not doing
cutting yourself short, aren't you? Selling yourself
absolutely, because it's this is where the two have to go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, opinions divide on that, but again, this is where we come into the situation with people can basically everyone has a different view on life. Everyone has a different view. That people view themselves differently to how other people view them, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where that creativity in us comes in, because we can actually make any situation, we can legitimize any situation
Yeah.
for ourselves and our points of view, and then find the evidence to support
back you
that.
up. Yeah.
That's, and in actual fact, just on the surface, it's like, oh yeah, I can see how that works. But when you go deeper and deeper into it, you realize, oh my God, that works on such a deep level
Yeah.
that we don't even realize. You know, we spoke about Magic Mac last week, for example, and it's like, well, that is still another level of that, where, you know, you have a certain view and aspect of situations in yourselves, and then you're just doing, it's still working on the same principles.
Of course it is, yeah.
Even if it's not consciously. So the whole scenario with having different opinions, so just nipping back into that aspect of relationships, and you have a different opinion to someone and it causes a conflict, having the ability to reflect and see how you react yourself and see how the other person reacted. Of course, you can make, well, I was right, that person is wrong.
Yeah.
But you see what's happened in their world, they can completely legitimize as well.
Yeah.
And use their creative self to legitimize why they behave like they have done. And that's that person's experience.
Yeah.
Now, the importance of introspection and seeing both sides of the story, seeing both sides of the coin, is if you look at it from the perspective of the individuals, by saying, okay, having that patience and forgiveness in a situation, even if it might not happen immediately, and seeing, okay, that's why that person has behaved that way, or I don't know why that person has behaved that way and has thought like that, but allowing that to be. If you don't have that, if you absolutely insist on your opinion being correct, your opinion is correct from your perspective.
Yeah.
But if you only have your own perspective and you only look at it from your perspective, and that person has to agree, you're being a dictator.
Yeah.
So on an individual one-on-one basis, you can see someone acting like a dictator. Now you put that in the hands of a whole community or a whole country, that's what a dictatorship is.
Yeah.
So who out there would agree to, yeah, we should have dictators? Well, some people, I have spoken to people that think dictators are a good thing. Well, let's then go into the aspect that, talking about psychopaths earlier, one of the key jobs that psychopaths are attracted to, there's 5 industries that they're particularly attracted to. And these are the high functioning psychopaths. These are the ones who are intellectually clever as well as highly manipulative and deceptive and all the rest of it. But the 5 different jobs they're interested in is politics, is religion,
excuse me,
is the military, is banking, is media.
You
look at all of those 5 jobs and you think, if you've got high functioning psychopaths who will do anything to get to the top, will roughshod over anyone and do anything to get there, you can basically see how the world works.
Yeah.
You look at the world and think it's crazy, and you think, well, why does this happen? Why does that happen? Also, because whenever I've travelled around the world, I've gone into lots of different communities, and 99% or 95% of people, 99% of people I've met do not want any kind of conflict. Of course, they will have their individual issues in their own relationships, but you know, people are respectful and tolerant of each other generally, unless you're put in a situation where you're struggling for resources, whether it be energy, food, etc. And then you'll find people start turning on each other. But you've got someone at the top, and you look at it from a whole collective, pushing these buttons, making these decisions, creating these situations where that's why it's important not to give your energy away to these things and get caught up in them, and just look at yourself.
There's an analogy for what you've just kind of said. The red ants and the black ants. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Right.
So you've got a jar with red ants and black ants in there.
Yeah.
Now they might have their individual little things, whilst they're inside there, but generally
Yeah.
they'll all co-live
Okay.
without any issues. Now you put the lid on the jar, and you
Yeah.
shake the jar,
Right.
and the ants start looking at each other, and then blaming each other, because they believe that you're the ones shaking this jar, you're the ones causing all this
All
disturbance,
this chaos.
and then the other people are, when really it's the person outside shaking the jar,
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like a big picture of what you've just said. Is we can find our evidence to see why and you can find your evidence to think why we're, but really it could be just a bit of outside manipulation, brainwashing, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So it's good to take a step back.
Yeah. Well, you talk about brainwashing and us being programmed as a human race, etc. If you take certain examples of things that people believe collectively, okay, look at, for example, going through history, the biblical flood. Everyone knows about the biblical flood. Okay, there can't be many people walking, certainly within Christianity culture, everyone's heard of the biblical flood with Noah. Everyone's heard of Noah and the ark and all the rest of it. Now, the story behind that is way different to what the surface story is. But how many people are aware that there's been bigger floods than that within the last 6,000 years?
That we don't know about.
But
aren't mainstream.
We don't. Christian culture doesn't know, because we just know, there was one biblical flood, and that was the start of what came from that, Adam and Eve, the story of Adam and Eve and all the rest of it. Generally, that's what people know of.
Yeah. I don't know if that's still taught as like a main.
It probably isn't,
in
because
primary school.
No,
but it was when I was young.
Yeah, because the education system and the things they teach them these days have changed so much that really it's doing away with Christian values, etc. It's about looking at it and having tolerance for every other religion, so to speak, and Christianity is being demonized. I'm not sitting here defending Christianity as a religion, but as a way of being. I don't think you can go far wrong if the main tenet of Christianity is basically treat people how you expect to be treated yourself. Okay, that isn't religion. That's a way of life. Anyone who disagrees, no, I should be able to treat anyone the way I want, and then not be treated likewise back. Well, you're a narcissist.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You're a psychopath.
I was about to say psychopath. Okay? Yeah.
You've got low conscious awareness. You've got low consciousness. So they're different, different breeds altogether. And we will delve into that over the coming podcasts. But when you have that awareness, you're going to basically see the world in a different light. So biblical flood, everyone knows that's common knowledge. But in Babylonian culture, in Turkey, for example, in Armenia, the common knowledge is that there were bigger floods that have taken place over the last 6,000 years. The fact that these have come in a particular cycle, and that cycle is repeating, that's where the light bulb goes on and you're like, hello, what's all this about? And again, that comes down to Jason Brashear's Archaics work. It's unrivaled. Okay, he's proven meticulously and asked anyone to, call him out and to basically try and disprove his theories. Interestingly, he's found out recently that his theories about the Phoenix phenomenon and about these cataclysms that take place on this earth periodically, he's found a book from 1740, I think, where a guy was writing about the Phoenix phenomenon.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. And he's only just found it.
Yeah.
It's just come into his game just recently. So he thought that he was the first one to find this. It's been written about
Been
before.
written about before, yeah.
And the guy that wrote about it did it for the same reasons,
Okay.
to try and wake up humanity, to
So
try and say,
history
look,
being repeated.
yeah, absolutely.
And did he call it the Phoenix phenomenon as well back then?
This is the thing. The Phoenix is something that has been known as something throughout history.
Symbolises a certain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. So these mathematical laws that we live within are a real thing.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is where, if you just turn around and say, "Oh, everyone's heard it," but so many people will dismiss it. Oh, we live in a simulation. We live in a simulacrum. We live in a matrix. Whatever name you want to give it, sometimes the name can do it a disservice. It doesn't really matter what you call it. It's a case of what we've spoken about previously about we have far more of an effect on our circumstances and our world, our individual world, than we could ever really than we have ever really begun to appreciate and acknowledge. So, for example, when you've got a situation where you've got these repeating loop patterns, whether it's in your thoughts, whether it's in events, okay, and they fit a perfect mathematical structure, you're like, what, for me, it was like what I kind of knew intuitively was like just gathering more proof and evidence that, it's right. So let's say, again, from a programmable perspective, how we are easily programmed, we see ourselves on Earth in this solar system, okay, and we just think we're going around in space.
You might upset the flat earthers here.
Well, yeah. Again,
that's another conversation for another time.
Well, this is another situation where people just get so fixed on their own opinions that they don't look at, and then they stop there and don't look any further.
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas you have this open-mindedness of, okay, we'll go back to open-mindedness again. Of, that's interesting. I can see how flat earthers come to those opinions because of this, and this. Okay. And they're legitimate reasons. But then you've got globalists who say, well, I'm a globalist because of this, and they're legitimate as well.
And they're both right.
They're both right.
Like we said earlier.
Yeah, so it's like, well...
everyone can find evidence to back up their own point of view.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you look at our solar system, okay, you've got how many planets in our solar system? 7 or 8?
Eight now, because
Pluto got kicked out.
Wasn't good enough, was it?
No, so, which is interesting in itself. It's like, hang on, it is or it isn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, what you've got from a mathematical point of view. Now, I only recently found this out, but from a mathematical point of view, you've got a perfect mathematical construct in the shape of pi. Pi is 3.14. It's a mathematical constant, okay, and what it is it's the ratio of a circle's circumference to the diameter.
Okay.
It's 3.14. So a circle is real, okay.
Yep.
1 point starts and then it finishes.
Yep.
The circumference to the diameter is 3.14. It's a mathematical constant.
Yeah.
Now, did you know that, for example, Mercury from the surface of the sun times 3.14 pi, we find Venus.
Okay.
Okay.
This fascinates me, this mathematical stuff, by the way.
From Venus, from the surface of the sun, times 3.14 pi, we find Mars. Mars, from the surface of the sun, times 3.14, we find the asteroid belt. And so on with all the planets. They are all have this absolute constant 3.14 construct, constant within the construct of the solar system.
Yeah.
Out of all those planets, one planet doesn't.
Go on.
Can you guess which?
Not Earth.
Earth.
Yeah.
Earth, it's known as the Tycho's Bode law.
Right.
Earth does not fit in the mathematical construct, and neither does the moon.
Okay.
So really, we're the invading planet. The moon isn't a moon, when you consider the size of Saturn, when you consider the size of Jupiter, Jupiter's got something like 200 moons.
Right.
And you think of the size of it compared to Earth, and their moons are tiny compared to our moon. So it's not really a moon.
Right.
But it's also an invading rock, planet, whatever, as is Earth compared to everything else in the solar system.
Okay, that's interesting.
So it's fascinating. You think, okay, well, what is all that about? As you start looking at piecing this together as to where we are, what we're doing here, it's far different to what we have been led to believe.
Yeah.
Through the education system, through what we're taught through television, radio, media, etc. Another good example of us being programmed and believing that we are the pinnacle of civilizations, of the human race has ever been. We look back at bygone eras, a couple of 100 years ago, for example, they were living, didn't even have a sewer system, blah, blah, blah. That's only what you've been told.
Yeah.
You've only got to look at some of the buildings around the world, some of the constructs, for example, Angkor Wat.
Okay. What, yeah.
The detail in that temple in a jungle in Cambodia is unbelievable. You look at the buildings like St Paul's Cathedral.
I was about to say St Paul's. I've been there recently.
Yeah. And you look at
we couldn't touch the architecture now.
And you look at them and you think, we were only supposed to be working with horse and buggy.
Yeah, hammers and chisels.
Hammers and chisels, and we made that.
Yeah.
Now, going back to what we said before, you can make a good excuse in your mind. Yeah. You can legitimize it by using your creative mind. So, because rather than actually say, what is all that about? How could that be? And looking deeper into it, you can just dismiss it because you'll legitimize your point of view using your creativity. But if you actually stop for long enough, and it would only really take 30 seconds, you'd have to say,
bit of critical thinking.
Critical thinking is absolutely.
Yeah. Hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did that? Probably the best one of all. And how old do they say the Great Pyramid is? The Giza Pyramid.
I'm not even sure. Yeah. Thousands?
Maybe. They can't really date it. It was underwater at one point.
Right.
Again, we go back to these massive cataclysmic events which have been hidden from us in history, but they're not people making these things up in the historical books, and with the indigenous stories that get passed down through the ages. There is, in like, I think of some of the ancient historians, the old historians who wrote about previous events, etc. It's there in the history books.
Yeah.
It's not people.
A lot of it gets buried as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's not being made up, in modern day by some conspiracist theorist who says, "Oh, here's this, that, and the other."
No,
they are in the history books.
Yeah.
So
this is what I was going to say. Sorry, just to go on a little bit of a tangent. This is what I was going to say when you were speaking about Noah and the biblical floods, and if it's still taught in schools.
Yeah.
Like, our only perception of life is what we've been taught from growing up to modern day. So if they change the curriculum in the schools, history, for example, then our outlook and our thought process on what the world is completely different. And this is, I've spoken to people that from abroad and stuff, and they don't get taught what we get taught in the Western world at school. So their beliefs growing up about history are completely different, opposing views to what ours are.
Yeah. So
this is what I was going to say. Like history's been rewritten. Well, how many times over has that happened?
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry to go back.
Well, you look at we're talking about the Great Pyramid in Egypt.
Yeah, we're taught it was.
What are we told?
Do you know what's really funny is this week I saw a video on this, and the guys broke down the maths on what they tell you, how long it took to build, how many blocks are per, and he breaks down the maths, and he was saying something like, it's thousands of years it would have taken to build if they would have, built it the way that we were told they were built.
Yeah.
But I know where you're going to go with this about the mathematical.
Location what I was going to say about it was, we are taught, and people actually run with this belief. And again, you've got to do some critical thinking. They run with the belief that it was made with a pulley rope system, that they used thousands of slaves to pull these blocks. I saw a program on it maybe 20 years ago where they did this construction where they're pulling these You know those blocks weighed between 2.5 tons
Here we go. Yeah, this is what the guy was saying.
and 70 tons.
Yeah.
Now, okay, even if in your wildest dreams you can imagine, yeah, they used, because they didn't have wheels, they weren't using wheels apparently, they would just put them on these logs and roll them up there.
Yeah.
Okay. The pyramid is at an altitude of 210 feet in altitude. So, okay, so you put these
Up to 70 stone rocks.
70 tons, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
70 tons rocks, although they would have probably been the base, but you've still,
Yeah.
there might have been the base ones, but you've still got to go up to a certain level where
Mhm.
you're still doing 60, 68 tons, 66 tons, 64 tons, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Or just drag them up with these ropes. Okay, even if you can somehow work out that that's how they
That's
must
how
have
it
been
was
done.
built, yeah.
Okay. You build any set of blocks yourself. Okay. Children. Okay. Toddlers learn this at bloody 1 year of age.
With Lego.
If you don't, no, not with Lego, because
Oh.
that's fixing it to it.
Yeah.
Just with building blocks.
Yeah.
Rectangle, squares. Unless you build that absolutely perfectly, what's going to happen?
Eventually it falls over.
It's going to
Yeah.
topple.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're talking about these 70-ton limestone blocks that are now being stacked on top of each other in such a
precision.
millimeter precision.
Yeah.
If they had not been of millimeter precision, it would have toppled over. Okay, it would not hold. Coupled with that, they used an adhesive on these blocks 1/50th of an inch thick.
Right.
The adhesive, and literally that adhesive was stronger than the limestone rocks themselves. So
makes no sense.
If you can still blasé away with that thought, say, yeah, well, that's how they did it because that's how I was told, then yeah, that's fair enough. Maybe as a conscious being, you're not ready to ask those critical questions because of the discomfort that it causes you of your world.
Challenging the upbringing that you had.
And again, this path isn't for everyone.
No,
it's not for the faint-hearted. But I'd like to think that everyone would look to help improve themselves and their lives. Yeah. Generally,
there's something about the pyramid's location as well. Oh, there's so many different theories.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of mathematical things with the pyramids which are just too coincidental to how they've been built, where they've been built, why they've been built, the location of it. There's something about the longitude and latitude of the exact location of the main pyramid or something. Yeah. Is the same as the circumference of the Earth. Or, do you know what I mean? It's just crazy stuff.
Again, this is where the archaic's work is unrivaled.
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing is, it's not like he's gone and done all the work himself. He admits he's standing on the shoulders of others, of people throughout history who have written about these things. And we look back to antiquity and think, oh, they didn't know nothing then, so we dismiss anything that we look at the buildings. How the hell did they build this? How did they build that? Another good example is you've got I think it was the maths paper that 16-year-olds used to do 100, 120, 130 years ago. Okay, they were given a maths paper to do at the end of school, and at 16 years of age, for example. The top professors at universities today couldn't do those maths papers. What does that tell you? So people weren't thick then, or they didn't. What you've been taught to believe is that they were subservient to us. They weren't as bright as us, etc., etc., and weren't as intelligent, weren't as intellectual. Well, they were.
The more so. Yeah, the more I've read into history, the more I think we're the least advanced civilization.
Well, look at the use of phones.
Yeah.
All it's doing is just go to your phone. Just everything you'll learn from your phone. Well, you're not actually doing anything to improve or move forward yourself, because you just rely on it, and you can see what's happening around us. You know, you go on some of these videos on YouTube, which are all done for a laugh. In America, what's the capital of England? Where is England? They don't know. They don't know.
They haven't got a clue.
They haven't got a clue. And you can see the same thing happening here.
Yeah, we're
And
getting dumbed down over time,
absolutely,
100%.
absolutely.
To go back to the maths, in the summer of 2020 when we were locked down, I did a course, online course, obviously, and it was to do with different things. But in that course, we learned about Fibonacci. So he was a guy from Rome, I believe, or he was from Italy, and he went over to India, and he learned how the Italians were doing he learned how the Indians, I believe, were doing numbers,
Yeah.
how they used to calculate numbers, etc.
Yeah.
And then he took that back to Rome, took that back to Italy, and they built the whole decimal system that we now live off,
Yeah.
at least in the Western world, off of what his findings in India. Now, his name is Fibonacci, which is, if you can go in to look at the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio, etc.
Yeah.
And it's all off of life. So the Indians had found out that there was a mathematical construct, like we spoke about, and that everything was a sequence similar to pi. It's not the same as pi, but it's similar to pi, where the way the seeds come out of a flower,
Yeah.
when it's the way life is formed, like every single step of life has a Fibonacci sequence, a mathematical sequence to it. So Fibonacci had gone back to Italy, and basically he was the mathematician for, I don't know, whoever. My history is not great on this sort of stuff, but our whole system, as we know it, in terms of numbers, etc., is all built off of that. Now, if you delve down that rabbit hole, if you want to call it that,
Yeah.
that's when you can really figure out things about this mathematical construct that we live in, and everything is like perfect in the world of maths.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, it's a deep one, and it is overwhelming at some points, but it answers a lot of questions when you go down like the buildings and things from ancient times.
Yeah.
You think, how did they do it and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, it all ties in a lot when you go down.
So you mentioned the Fibonacci sequence, you mentioned the golden ratio. We've
Yep.
got phi and pi.
Yeah.
They're all different mathematical constants. Okay. It's systems within systems.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. So that's on different levels and different aspects. It is really fascinating, and people, university professors, etc., spend a lifetime on studying just one aspect of it.
Yeah.
Okay. But this is kind of in finishing now. We'll come to the end of the podcast. In finishing, we then go into the aspect of spirit, and we go into the other aspect of knowledge, mind. Okay. With knowledge and mind, it's basically unlimited. You can just go down a rabbit hole on one particular subject, and people with amazing minds, amazing intellect, can go onto one subject, and they don't get to the end of it, because there's still more.
Yeah.
There will always be more.
It's infinite. Yeah.
Because it's infinite, which is where spirit comes from. So spirit is a fractal of God. Now, God itself is a programmable word. People have been programmed, including me. I don't like using that word, to be honest with you. I prefer to use the word creator.
Yeah.
Because it's such a strong program in me that God throws up these images of an all-imposing being who tells us what we can and can't do, and judges on what we can and can't do, which nothing could be further from the truth. Absolutely not. And again, this is where religions come in, where you have to give your life and service to God, and you will be judged upon how you basically behave in your life, etc., your deeds. And from a very early age, I was always had a very strong feeling that, well, if God was the builder of this earth, this solar system, of this universe, he's not going to be judging me because I've acted incorrectly in this moment. Like, I've reacted to someone. I was always a reactor. Someone behaved badly towards me, I'd react towards that. So then, of course, being brought up within a Catholic school, you then got to deal with the guilt. Guilt is one of the lowest forms of frequency that we can live in. Now, the question really comes down to the two dichotomies we have. Was there a creator? Or the science side of things, we came from a big bang. And everything is random, everything was chaos, came from a big bang, and evolution.
I was about to say evolution
is why we're here today.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that at face value seems like just two basic arguments. Mm-hmm. I'm reading a book at the moment called The Evolution Cruncher.
Okay.
And even though I found my way to so-called spirituality through intuition, through just a knowing, as opposed to having to read something hardcore black and white, reading this book, it's a massive book, something like 600 pages long, and I like to dog ear the pages where there's interesting information. Mm-hmm. Well, every page would have a dog ear on it. Where do you stop? Yeah. It is so bloody obvious of how evolution is the biggest crock of shit ever.
Yeah.
Right. And I will delve into this in future because people should hear the absurdity of what evolution is.
Maybe we can go into the next episode.
Into that. Yeah. So then you have to ask a question, or I ask the question. So what is spirit? What is a creator? Etc. If we are such powerful beings that we can create our own realities for ourselves, whether it be negative or positive, as people say, well, yeah, how does that work? How does that work in relation to a creator? And what are our best lessons in life? Experiences. Mm-hmm. Okay, they give us our biggest lessons. Okay, as opposed to reading a book. Books are good, knowledge is good, but experiences are far more profound and teach us far more about ourselves and about life. Mm-hmm. So, looking at it from a creator perspective, what would a creator? If we're aspects of our spirits, are fractals of the Godhead, of the Creator, then it would make sense. The best form of learning, any school would teach you this, whether it's a what they call a Montessori school, or that children learn best from doing from experience, as opposed to having to sit down at a desk. So God's sending out fractals of spirit, and we're all a fractal of that, to have learning experiences. That's how, you've got a situation where he's gleaning more and more knowledge. Now, whether he did that or whether he's doing it, you might, well, surely it's a continuation. Mm-hmm. You're always learning, etc. So your creator will encourage you to go out and have life experiences. He will want you, as a fractal of the creator being, to be learning all the time. And you look at that compared to, let's just say, the holiest of holy monks, who go and sit in a cave for their whole life. In silence, being in that bliss state, in connection with God. They go back to the Godhead, to the Creator, and say, oh, what did you learn? What did you do to help? Well, I stayed in this blissful state, and etc. Okay, well, I already know that blissful state. I'm there all the time. I wanted you to go out and have some experiences for yourself. Yeah. Go back again. We'll always be coming back to be learning new experiences.
There's a cycle in itself.
Yeah. Likewise, people who wake up, for example, to, oh my God, the world isn't as it is, and start going down the road of conspiracy, flat earth, as you spoke about before, and just focusing on that one aspect, for example. Well, when it comes to your vehicle being expired this time round, so you see God asking the question, what did you, the earth is flat. Yeah, okay. And then the globalist comes in next to him, I prove the world is a globe. Do you know what I mean? what have you actually learned when you're focused just on those one
Focus on
things
one thing.
and
Yeah.
nothing else? Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
What is that going to do for you as a
Yeah.
being going forward? So it's interesting to look at these things, but just to focus on these individual topics as opposed to not doing the inner work.
Work.
So
Yeah.
again,
Just power stripping.
it comes down to, you know, in finishing, it's the inner work that is most important.
Yeah.
Whatever level you're looking at, whether it's a personal level day to day,
Mhm.
or whether it's the bigger picture of what we're doing here and our
Yeah.
relationship with the creator, with the universe, it's nothing more important.
No, I agree. Good place to end as well.
Right.
Worry about yourself. Okay, thank you everybody. That's episode 4 wrapped up. We'll have another one out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Maybe we can delve on the evolution side of things. But as always, any questions, then just let us know in the comments and we'll answer them. And then you can say your 3 favorite things. Like, comment, and subscribe.
I was going to say, worry about yourself.
Yeah, worry about yourself.